Welcome back to another deep dive. You know we love to keep up with the latest archaeology news. So today we're going to unearth some fascinating discoveries from a recent episode of Investigating History Daily Top News Headline.
Oh yeah, this episode's a good one.
We're going to travel back 7,000 years
Wow.
to examine some surprisingly stylish threads, explore the mysteries of Luxor Temple, and maybe even stumble upon a secret Templar cave.
I think you're going to be surprised by how these seemingly isolated discoveries actually paint a broader picture of human history, revealing patterns of behavior and cultural expression that span millennia.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
First up, a 7,000-year-old fashion statement.
Okay.
In Bordeaux, France, archaeologists have been re-examining a burial site from the 1970s, and they've found a man buried with remarkably well-preserved clothing.
It's not every day that textiles survive this long. It's truly remarkable. The fact that this tunic has survived for 7,000 years suggests that the burial conditions must have been incredibly favorable for preservation. It makes you wonder what else might be lying undiscovered, perfectly preserved beneath the earth.
Right, and this isn't just any ordinary tunic. Imagine this, 158 tiny Columbella rustica shells.
Wow.
Those little cone-shaped shells you find on the beach
Right.
were meticulously arranged in alternating patterns across the garment. Not only that, but 16 reindeer canine teeth,
Wow.
painted red, were carefully sewn into the fabric. What do you make of this elaborate decoration?
Well, it certainly suggests a level of craftsmanship and artistry that we might not typically associate with people from that era. Remember, this is 2,000 years before the pyramids were even built.
It's hard to even imagine.
I know. The use of shells and teeth as adornment goes way back. We see similar practices in cultures across the globe, from the Native American tribes of North America to the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Islands. It seemed to be a universal human impulse to embellish ourselves, to use objects from the natural world to express our identity or status.
I'm trying to picture this guy from 7,000 years ago getting dressed in the morning, carefully arranging those shells on his tunic. Yeah, this is the look. It really humanizes the past, Makes you realize that even our ancient ancestors cared about fashion.
Absolutely. And it challenges our assumptions about what life was like in the Neolithic period. We tend to think of it as a time of simple survival, but this discovery shows that there was room for artistry, self-expression, and maybe even a little bit of showing off.
Okay, so now let's fast forward a few thousand years and shift our focus to the Grand Luxor Temple in Egypt.
Okay.
As you know, it's been excavated since the 1800s.
Right.
So you wouldn't expect to find anything groundbreaking there, right? Well, archaeologists recently unearthed a magnificent black granite statue of Amenhotep III.
Wow.
Right there on Luxor's west bank.
It's incredible to think that a site as thoroughly explored as Luxor can still yield such remarkable finds.
Yeah.
It really underscores the vastness and complexity of these ancient sites. It's like peeling back layers of an onion, with each discovery revealing another facet of the past.
Exactly. And get this, they're describing this statue as a masterpiece depicting Amenhotep III as a young man full of vigor. And as if that wasn't enough, they also unearthed 66 fragments of other statues, including depictions of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess. That's a whole lot of history emerging from the dust.
It's particularly interesting that these statues were found toppled, most likely due to an earthquake. This gives us valuable insight into the forces that shaped the temple over time. We often think of these ancient structures as unchanging, but they were subject to the same natural disasters and the wear and tear of time as anything else.
Speaking of powerful figures in ancient Egypt, let's move on to a figure shrouded in even more mystery, Nefertiti. There's been a lot of buzz around an unfinished tomb in Amarna that might be connected to her.
Nefertiti's story is particularly fascinating because it's so intertwined with the pivotal moment in Egyptian history. As the great royal wife of Akhenaten the pharaoh, who initiated a radical shift away from traditional polytheistic beliefs, Nefertiti played a prominent role in this religious revelation. And yet, despite her prominence, her fate remains a mystery.
This tomb, known as Amarna Tomb 26, was actually discovered back in the 1880s.
Wow.
But it's been ravaged by looters, and time hasn't been kind to it either. But despite the damage, archaeologists have managed to unearth some incredible artifacts: over 200 figurines, an alabaster chest, and 2 colossal sarcophagi. Based on the evidence, they believe the tomb's primary occupants were Akhenaten himself and his daughter Meritaten.
And this is where things get really intriguing. You see, there's a third chamber in this tomb that was left unfinished. And the question that has been haunting archaeologists for over a century is, who was this chamber intended for? Could it be the final resting place of Nefertiti?
That possibility is definitely tantalizing. Finding Nefertiti's tomb would be a monumental discovery, potentially answering so many questions about her life, her role in Akhenaten's religious reforms, and her mysterious disappearance from historical records after his death. It would be like solving a 3,000-year-old cold case.
Absolutely. It would rewrite our understanding of this pivotal period in Egyptian history.
All of this makes me wonder, have you ever looked at those facial reconstructions they do where they use forensic techniques to recreate what people from the past might have looked like? It's almost like bringing history to life. They've done reconstructions for people like a Celtic woman from 18,800 BC, a Mycenaean warrior, even King Tut, Robert the Bruce, and Richard III. It's pretty amazing.
It really is. And it's not just guesswork. Forensic artists use a combination of scientific data and artistic skill to create these reconstructions.
Right.
They start with the skull, analyzing its features and using tissue depth markers based on ancestry and body type. Then they meticulously build up the facial muscles layer by layer, adding skin hair and other details based on archaeological evidence and knowledge of the time period. Of course, there's always an element of interpretation involved, so we can't say for sure that these reconstructions are 100% accurate.
Sure, but it's still incredible to think that we can look into the eyes of someone who lived thousands of years ago. It really collapses the distance between us and the past.
It certainly does. It reminds us that these weren't just nameless figures in history book. They were real people who laughed, cried, loved, and experienced the world just like we do. It's a powerful way to connect with our shared humanity.
All these incredible finds make you wonder what other secrets are out there. Well, there's a rumor about a discovery in England that has sparked a lot of excitement and, let's be honest, a healthy dose of skepticism. We're talking about an underground cave in Shropshire that some believe might have been connected to the Knights Templar.
Ah, the Knights Templar. Their story is shrouded in so much intrigue and mystery that it's no wonder any potential connection to them grabs the headlines. To understand the significance of this find, we need to step back and consider the historical context. The Knights Templar were a powerful military order that emerged during the Crusades. Their mission was to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land.
They became incredibly influential in medieval Europe, amassing vast wealth and power. But their story takes a dark turn when they were accused of heresy and idolatry by King Philip V of France. He had them arrested, tortured, and ultimately executed, bringing their reign to a dramatic end.
Exactly. And their dramatic downfall, coupled with their reputation for secrecy and their rumored possession of hidden treasures, has made them the subject of countless legends and conspiracy theories. So you can imagine why the discovery of a potential Templar hideout would send chills down the spines of history buffs.
Absolutely. These caves, seemingly untouched for centuries, are rumored to have been a place of pilgrimage and worship for the Templars, perhaps even offering refuge during their persecution. It's like something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie.
While the caves themselves are undoubtedly old, and their atmosphere is certainly evocative, we need to be cautious about jumping to conclusions. The evidence linking them definitively to the Knights Templar is still lacking. They could have been used by other groups seeking solitude and seclusion for their rituals. It's important to remember that England has a rich history of paganism and druidism, and these caves could just as easily have been associated with those traditions.
So the mystery continues.
That's the beauty of archaeology, isn't it? There's always more to discover, more pieces of the puzzle to uncover.
We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into these incredible discoveries. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're in the midst of exploring some pretty amazing recent discoveries in archaeology, from a 7,000-year-old fashion icon to potential Templar hideouts.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Each of these discoveries offers a glimpse into a much larger story, a story that stretches back thousands of years and connects us to our shared human heritage.
Before we move on, I wanted to circle back to that incredible statue of Amenhotep III we were talking about earlier. I was doing a little more reading, and it seems like this discovery could actually have some pretty big implications for our understanding of his reign. What can you tell us about that?
You're absolutely right. Amenhotep III's reign is considered a golden age in ancient Egyptian history. It was a time of peace, prosperity, and incredible artistic flourishing. His reign marked the peak of the 18th dynasty, and the monuments and statues from this period really reflect that sense of opulence and power. So finding a new statue of him, especially one in such remarkable condition, is a pretty big deal.
It's almost like we're getting a clearer picture of Amenhotep III as a person, not just a name in a history book.
That's a great way to put it. This statue, along with other artifacts from his reign, helps us to understand how he wanted to be portrayed, how he projected his power and authority. It's like adding another brushstroke to a portrait, revealing more detail and nuance.
And speaking of revealing details, what about those toppled statues of Sekhmet we talked about earlier? The ones that were probably knocked down by an earthquake? Those seem pretty significant too.
They are Sekhmet. The lion-headed goddess was a powerful and complex deity in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. She was associated with both healing and destruction, with the life-giving power of the sun and the ferocity of a lioness. Her presence at Luxor Temple, alongside of Amenhotep III, is a testament to the complex religious beliefs of the ancient Egyptians and how they sought to appease and honor different deities.
So even in their fragmented state, those toppled statues can tell us a lot about ancient Egyptian religion and mythology.
Exactly. And they serve as a reminder that these grand temples weren't just static monuments. They were dynamic spaces constantly evolving and being shaped by both human actions and natural forces.
We've been talking a lot about what these discoveries tell us about the past, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on why this matters for us today. Why should we care about ancient fashioned toppled statues or even the possibility of a secret Templar cave?
That's a question I think about a lot. In a world that's often obsessed with the latest trends and instant gratification, it can be easy to lose sight of the long view, to forget that we're part of a much larger story, a story that stretches back thousands of years. For me, archaeology is a powerful antidote to that short-sightedness. It connects us to our shared human heritage, reminding us that we're not so different from those who came before us. We share the same basic desires, fears, and aspirations.
It's like having a conversation with our ancestors, learning from their triumphs and mistakes.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe by understanding the past, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the present and make more informed decisions about the future.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm still a bit skeptical about those facial reconstructions. How accurate can they really be? I mean, aren't they just educated guesses?
It's a fair question. And yes, there is definitely an element of artistic interpretation involved. But these reconstructions are based on a lot more than just guesswork. Forensic artists use a meticulous process that combines scientific data with artistic skill. They start with the skull, carefully analyzing its features. Then they use tissue depth markers, which are based on ancestry and body type, to determine the thickness of the facial muscles. They build up the face layer by layer, adding skin hair and other details based on archaeological evidence and knowledge of the time period.
So it's a lot more scientific than I initially thought.
It is, and the technology is constantly evolving, becoming more and more sophisticated. For example, we can now analyze ancient DNA to determine things like hair and eye color, skin pigmentation, even the presence of certain diseases. This information can be used to create even more accurate reconstructions.
It's amazing to think that we can now look into the eyes of someone who lived thousands of years ago and get a sense of what they might have actually looked like.
It really is. And while we can't say for certain that these reconstructions are 100% accurate, they offer a powerful window into the past, allowing us to connect with our ancestors on a more personal level. It makes you realize that these weren't just nameless faces in a crowd. They were individuals with their own unique stories to tell.
All right, before we wrap up, we have to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the Templar in the cave. Those headlines were pretty attention-grabbing. Do you think there's any truth to them? Could this cave in Shropshire actually be a hidden Templar hideout?
Well, it's certainly a possibility. As we discussed earlier, the Knights Templar were a secretive organization, and there are many legends and myths surrounding them. But as with any historical claim, we need to rely on evidence, not just speculation.
So until there's more concrete proof, we should take those headlines with a grain of salt.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the mystery and intrigue. The possibility of uncovering a hidden Templar cave is exciting, and it sparks our imaginations. And who knows, maybe one day those caves will reveal their secrets.
I'll be waiting with bated breath.
Me too. And that's what's so exciting about archaeology. It's a field that's constantly evolving, full of surprises and new discoveries. It's about more than just digging up old objects. It's about understanding the human story in all its complexity.
And it's a story that's still being written. Who knows what incredible finds are waiting to be unearthed? Stay tuned as we continue to explore the mysteries of the past.
Welcome back. I'm still kind of geeking out about that whole Templar cave thing in Shropshire.
I know, me too.
Like, even if it's not a Templar hideout, just the thought of these caves just sitting there hidden for centuries, just waiting to be explored.
It's pretty cool.
It is. Speaking of feeling connected to the past, I wanted to circle back to those facial reconstructions we talked about earlier.
Okay.
It's got me thinking about the ethics of it all, you know?
Right. Like, do we have the right to recreate the faces of people who lived so long ago? Is it disrespectful?
That's a really important question, and it's something that archaeologists and museum curators think about a lot.
Yeah.
We're always trying to figure out the best way to study and display human remains It's so important to be respectful,
Yeah.
and to remember that these were once living, breathing people.
For sure. So, how do we balance the scientific value of facial reconstructions with, being respectful of the people they represent?
Well, I think transparency is really important. We need to be honest about what these reconstructions can and can't tell us and acknowledge that they're interpretations based on scientific data and artistic skill.
Right.
And we also have to think about the cultural context.
Hmm.
Different communities have different traditions and beliefs about how human remains should be treated. It's really important to talk to descendant communities and include them in the process.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
what are some key things you want our listener to take away from this episode?
I hope we've given them a sense of wonder and excitement about archaeology.
Me too.
All these discoveries we've talked about are just a glimpse of the amazing work being done around the world.
Yeah, and to think there's still so much more out there, so many stories waiting to be told.
Exactly. That's what makes it so amazing.
Yeah.
The past is this vast, mysterious landscape, and we're just starting to explore it.
So, to our listener, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and stay tuned for more fascinating discoveries. Until next time, happy digging.